couple weeks back, I did a collaborative video with Korwitsuki talking about a new commander from Bloomburrow, which of course isn't a new commander anymore, because the hype cycle of Magic the Gathering must be ever going and always moving forward. However, when I made my version of Zinnia the Valley's Voice, I went a direction that I wasn't expecting to go when I initially built the deck, and that was slivers. Now, there is only one problem with how I put that video together, and that is that I did not provide a proper upgraded section for Zinnia, as me and Korwitsuki had two completely different directions for the deck. That's not a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. I just think it's important to have a, just a standalone video that talks about how to make Zinnia as a sliver deck at full power. And not really full power, but certainly full power enough to be problematic. So, without further ado, let's talk about Zinnia Slivers. Zinnia Valley's Voice is an America commander with a very powerful ability, giving you the ability to clone any creature you have as a spell on the stack by paying 2 mana, and also making its base power and toughness 1, which would be a bad thing if it weren't for the fact that Zinnia also benefits from that by gaining XO, where X is the number of creatures with power of 1, at least their base power of 1. Zinnia is a very strong commander in my opinion, and honestly, going the route that I did in the original deck is one that I am very happy with. So, let's see what we can do in our full power version of the deck. Like the original, we are gonna try to double up on our commander's ability with cards like Reflections of Littjara and, of course, Kaith, Famed Mechanist. Kaith allows us to fabricate 1 on all of our creatures, meaning that they come in with a 1/1 counter or with an extra 1/1 colorless servo, which powers up our commander a lot. We can also pay 2 and tap her to populate, which will let us clone any creature token we have on the board, likely one that was cloned by Zinnia. Then we have Reflections of Littjara, we choose Slivers, and whenever we cast a spell of that type, we will copy that spell. And of course, we have a Glasspool Mimic, as we don't have the same budgetary restrictions. This is an MDFC that has the ability to become a copy of any creature we control, except it also gives it Rogue and Shapeshifter on top of its other types. Past that, we need to make sure that we are able to get into our opponents. We are a go wide / go tall deck, where we want to make a big board, and that big board will make our commander nice and beefy. So, let's go ahead and talk about what happens when you have a go tall creature, and they are allowed to collide with your opponent's life. These are our Evasive Slivers. They will give all slivers flying, including our commander, once our commander is turned into a sliver. Winged Sliver gives flying to everybody. Shifting Sliver makes all slivers unable to block anything but slivers. Shadowy Sliver gives all slivers shadows. Cloud Shredder Sliver gives all slivers flying and haste. Belligerent Sliver and Two-Headed Sliver also give menace. And if a commander has flying and menace, that's usually good enough to get in most situations. Now, we need to make sure that our commander has lots of keywords as well, so Heart Sliver is part of our keyword soup package, giving our commander and every other sliver haste. Striking Sliver gives first strike, Sentinel Sliver gives vigilance, Blur Sliver gives haste as well, and Bone Scythe and Fury Sliver both give double strike to any of our slivers. Now, the most important thing any sliver can do is grant raw stats to the board, so let's look at the 9 ways we have of making that happen, beginning with Battle Sliver. This gives all slivers 2-0. Blade Sliver gives all slivers 1-0. Bone Splitter gives 2-0. Cleaving gives 2-0. Sinew gives 1-1. Regal Sliver gives 1-1, and the Monarch, so it's basically pulling double duty. And then Magma Sliver lets all slivers give a sliver XO until end of turn. Yeah, this could probably just end the game for us very quickly. This is probably the strongest sliver in this deck. First Sliver's Chosen gives Exalted, which is a weaker version of Magma Sliver's ability, but unlike Magma Sliver, this stacks. So if we have a First Sliver's Chosen and a copy of it on the board via Offspring or Populate or Reflections, then all of our slivers have Exalted. If we have 4 slivers on the board, that will give 8 power to our commander whenever it swings, not counting the power it gets from all of our base power 1 cards. And finally, we have Steel Form Sliver, which gives 0-1 to all of our slivers. Now, we also need to make sure that our commander is well protected, so to facilitate that, let's go ahead and begin with a Teferi's Protection. This card, and I'm selecting the wrong printing of it because it was the cheapest one available, but Teferi's Protection lets us just deuces out of any bad situation. Our life total can't change, we gain protection from everything, all of our permanents phase out, and then we exile Teferi's Protection. We also have Poultice Sliver to give our slivers regenerate, Diffusion Sliver to give our slivers ward 2, and Crystalline Sliver to give our slivers Shroud. All of these combined should mean that it is very hard for our opponent to get in and remove our slivers. But we need to make sure that our commander is also transformed into a sliver, so to facilitate that, we have a Maskwood Nexus, which makes all of our creatures every creature type, including the spells, including the cards in the graveyard, and gives us the ability to spawn a 2/2 Shapeshifter token. Hivestone will also make all of our creatures slivers, and Arcane Adaptation will do the same thing. But for ones that are just on the board, Amoeboid Changeling can turn our Zinnia into a sliver by tapping itself, and Mirror Entity can turn all of our creatures into slivers. Most importantly, though, the Mirror Entity can change their base power and toughness. This means we will be able to aim our commander squarely at somebody's jaw and just get tons and tons of power. Instead of paying X into Mirror Entity and making a board that is huge, we pay 1 into Mirror Entity to transform our board into an army of base power 1/1s, which means our commander will get that much more power from all of them. Also, it frees up all of our mana for everything else we would want to do on our turn. That all said, just having an idea of the core strategy is not enough to execute on the deck. We need to make sure that we have plenty of cards in our hand. So, let's talk about how we're going to get those cards into our hand so we can play them. I decided to go with a 12-card draw package here because sliver decks always run on the back foot because people are always trying to keep them down, and for good reason. So let's go ahead and talk about each of these cards and why they are included, beginning with Welcoming Vampire. Whenever one or more creatures enter the battlefield with power 2 or less, we draw a card once per turn. We can clone Welcoming Vampire to get extra instances of this ability, and our commander has power that is low enough to trigger the Welcoming Vampire. All in all, this is a solid draw engine that we can use throughout the entire game. Vanquisher's Banner is a no-brainer in a lot of tribal decks. We choose the tribe, all that tribe gets +1/+1, and whenever we cast a card from the tribe, we get to draw a card. Valakut Awakening is an MDFC, allowing us access to the ability to wheel our hand away if we have a bad one. Synapse Sliver gives all slivers the ability to draw when we deal damage to somebody, an effect that is mirrored across cards like Reconnaissance Mission, Coastal Piracy, and Bident of Thassa. We have that ability plus more in Kindred Discovery, where we get to choose Sliver, and whenever that creature enters the battlefield or attacks, we get to draw a card. Honestly, if we get Kindred Discovery online, it's very hard for anybody to deal with us any longer. We just get that many cards. Military Intelligence will draw us a card anytime 2 or more creatures attacks. Hollowhead Sliver will give us looting on all of our slivers. Capricious Sliver gives us impulse draw on all of our slivers. And Homing Sliver gives us access to sliver cycling, so if there's a specific sliver you want for ending the game, we can grab that out of the deck whenever we so choose. That said, we do need to also make sure our opponents don't have the ability to come back, so we need a way to remove all of their stuff. Let's talk about that. I've got an 11-card removal package here. Each of these is doing something very, very good for getting rid of problems that we might face. Beginning with Blade Back Sliver. This card has Hellbent, and as long as we have no cards in hand, Sliver creatures gain the ability to tap and deal 1 damage to a player or a Planeswalker. Planeswalker removal isn't always super relevant, but The main reason this is in is it is a low mana sliver that does have the ability sometimes to remove something from the board. Most of the time, though, it's going to be an easy Offspring clone. Chaos Warp can get rid of any type of permanent we need and give our opponent a different card in exchange. Generous Gift and Stroke of Midnight are 3 mana ways to blow up any kind of permanent for the most part on the board. Duergar Hedge Mage has one of the best enter the battlefield effects of pretty much any creature I can think of. He gets to blow up an artifact and an enchantment for 3 mana. If we have Offspring on him, we're blowing up 4 cards for 5 mana, which is a very good rate of return. Thorncast Sliver gives all of our slivers the ability to deal 1 damage to a creature or player whenever they attack, which we'll be attacking with them a lot, so being able to just aim sometimes 3, 4, or even 10 damage at a single creature can oftentimes get rid of very problematic things on the board. Witch Enchanter hasn't entered the battlefield to blow up any artifact or enchantment. Constricting Sliver has the ability to exile any creature an opponent controls when we drop it on the battlefield. Meteor Golem enters the battlefield and blows up any non-land permanent, and if we have enough mana, God forbid, to clone this, we get that twice. Negate and Counterspell will both protect our board and also get rid of potential win cons, as they are very, very powerful counterspells. And finally, we have a singular board wipe in this deck, and that is Ondu Inversion. Mostly because it is, in fact, an MDFC, so we have the ability to flip it into a different card if we need the land instead of the removal. That said, we do have a couple other things to talk about, like being able to afford some of the more expensive cards in the deck. And I don't mean monetarily, I mean the ramp package. We're running only about a 10-card ramp package in this deck because, honestly, we don't really need much more than that. Our commander comes down very low, and our mana curve is also pretty low. So let's begin with one of the ones that's giving us utility, Honored Heirloom. This lets us add a mana of any color and also gives us the ability to exile any card from a graveyard if we need. Now, this does cost the same amount as our commander, and usually I would advise against that, but for this kind of a deck, that doesn't really hurt us too much. Again, everything in our deck is very low cost. Charitable Levy gives us a little stacks effect that once it pays off, will draw us a card and then get a plains out of the deck. Azuria Signet, Arcane Signet, Izzet Signet, Talisman of Conviction, and Ornithopter of Paradise are all operating as basic mana rocks in our deck. Kora Cartographer and Solemn Simulacrum enter the battlefield and get lands out of our deck at will. And then we have a Wayfarer's Bauble, which we can sacrifice to get any basic land out of the deck. All in all, I kept the ramp package pretty much identical to the original deck because I didn't see much reason to change it. Where I saw the most need to change was instead the land section. We've added a lot of MDFCs, but we also need to make sure that if we don't have a budget, we are building a responsibly robust mana package. So for this, I've gone ahead and gone with 2 of each basic land and a single bounce land in Boros Garrison. I don't like bounce lands personally, but I am warmed up to them when I have lots of MDFCs, since a bounce land gives me the ability to return a face-down MDFC to my hand and use it as a spell later on in the game. So if I play Ondu Inversion as a land, I can just have access to a board wipe whenever I need if I'm willing to hold onto this bounce land for a little while. Past that, we've got 3 fetching lands, all in the colors of the commander, and we've got 3 filter lands, again, all in our colors. I'd like the filter lands more than most, so I don't know, bite me. Then we've got 3 flip lands, we've got a bunch of Omni lands, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Ragaran Triome, and Sliver Hive, which lets us play any type of mana at all as long as it is to cast a Sliver spell. And then finally, we've got some Pain lands with Battlefield Forge, a Darkheart Wastes, and Shivan Reef. I can't speak. Steam Vents, Sacred Foundry, and Hallowed Fountain are our shock lands. Deserted Beach, Storm Carved Coast, and Sundown Pass are our slow lands. Thundering Falls, Meticulous Archive, and Elegant Parlor are our surveil lands. These lands have been picked because they let us look at the top card of our deck and manipulate it, and they are also typed so they can be yanked out of the deck at any point. I kept saying finally, thinking that I was almost done, and then I realized that I wasn't the further I scrolled down. I'm not used to doing full power decks. I'm sorry. I'm used to seeing Omni lands and going, oh, well, that's all. The only thing after that is utility, because that's what comes next in the alphabet. Anyway, that all said, we do need to show you a little bit of gameplay on how to play the deck, so let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about what a keepable hand is in this deck. In my playtesting, I found that this deck has to be very careful with what it keeps. You want to have 3 lands minimum and access to all of your colors no matter what. You also want a 2-mana sliver in your opening hand, as that's the easiest thing to use, generally speaking, with Zinnia early on. If you have access to draw as well, then that's just perfect, and in this hand we have access to draw in Reconnaissance Mission. We have all of our colors between Hollowed Fountain, Scalding Tarn, and the backside of Witch Enchanter, and we have the 2-mana sliver with Cloud Shredder Sliver. So let's go ahead and keep it, draw our opening card, and drop that Scalding Tarn down to get a Triome out of the deck and move forward. We've grabbed the Rogger and Triome out of our deck. We have access to a few plays, so what we need to establish right now is whether it's more important to get a sliver on the board or hold that strategy close to our chest. For my take, I'd say we drop the Hollowed Fountain down tapped and just let that strategy stay close to our chest. We don't really need people knowing what we're doing quite yet, given that Slivers paints you with a target on your back instantaneously. Once turn 3 comes around, we have the Sliver Hive, but we still want to go ahead and keep that strategy under wraps. So we're going to play our flip land, tap 3, and get our commander out on the board. We are now in a very, very good spot, as we will have access to 2 Cloud Shredder Slivers when the next turn comes around. We are on turn 4. There's a Reflections of Lit Jara, which is super helpful. Now we can go ahead and go full hog with our strategy. Our Sliver Hive is out. We are tapping out. We have a Cloud Shredder Sliver and another copy of a Cloud Shredder Sliver. Now we have access to basically a giant target on our back, but that's not really the worst thing in the world. We're going to attack with Zinnia and the 2 Slivers all at the same person if they don't have a flying blocker. Zinnia gets to swing in for 3 damage because both of our Cloud Shredder Slivers are base power of 1. Then we go to turn 5. We have a Wing Sliver here. So we need to go ahead and turn over this Witch's Enchanter. It is now less important that we get this card online, and more important that we get the Reflections of Lit Jara out. The cat is out of the bag on what our strategy is, so we need to start getting everything set up to have a giant set of turns that our opponent can't do anything about. Reflections is out. We don't have a super threatening board state yet. We might not be board wiped quite yet. So the next turn comes up. Here's our Hive Stone. And now we have a couple of options. We can either play Reconnaissance Mission and then follow up with the Hive Stone or the Winged Sliver, or we can go ahead and drop down the Cleaving Sliver, and, well, we won't really gain much out of that. We don't have the ability to make our commander a sliver right now, and we don't have the mana to clone it. So for my sake, I think the right thing to do is tap out and go ahead and get the Reconnaissance Mission online. This means we'll get 3 draws by attacking, and there's a Thundering Falls. It's not exactly what we want since it is a tap land, but it does let us see that there's a counter spell here, and we can hold on to that for a following turn. I'm perfectly okay with that. I would have liked the ability to play the Hive Stone, but we didn't draw an untapped land, so we're just going to go ahead and suffer for that one. The next turn comes up. We have access to the counter spell. We have access to 6 mana. So at this point, I think what we need to do is make sure that we are being super aggressive. Let's go ahead and tap 4 mana. Let's get the Winged Sliver out. Let's clone the Winged Sliver as soon as we do. We have 2 clones of the Sliver, and we are going to attack with our commander. We don't have the kind of board that necessitates our Hive Stone quite yet, and we want to hold up this 2 mana right here so that we have access to a counterspell when we need it. And swinging in with all of these creatures means we will draw lots of cards. We don't need most of the stuff here, so we can just sculpt our next draw with the Meticulous Archive. See that it's a Chaos Warp. That's a nice removal spell. And if we look at our hand, we are actually lacking in removal spells. So we're going to keep the Chaos Warp on top, and with our hand of 11, we do need to discard down. let's assume that we're playing in a game that doesn't have anybody with flying or reach that is very important, and we can just build a powerful board all the way to the end of the game. So we're going to play this deserted beach, and we're going to look at our hand and see what our available plays are. I think it's time to go ahead and let the game-winning part of our strategy out of the bag. Here is our Hive Stone, and we are going to follow it up by paying 4 mana into a Cleaver Sliver. But we're going to pay the 2 extra mana, and we're going to make the clones of the Cleaver Sliver. Now note, this is the way that you kill somebody if they don't have mana up. If they do have mana up, then we may not go this full hog at someone. But since I'm fairly certain that we can just kill someone, we are going to do it. If you look at our current board state, our Cleaver Slivers that we got 3 copies of, one from the Reflections of Littjara and one from Offspringing for our commander, we have a lot of power. 6 power is being delivered to our commander from the Cleaving Slivers. And since 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of our creatures have base power of 1, 6 additional power is being granted over to our commander. Our commander is swinging now for 13 damage at somebody. We can just aim the commander at a player and put them within lethal range. If we've hit them enough with our commander, we may just be taking a player out of the game outright at this stage. If that's the case, then we're golden. Since we have a pretty decent hand, we only want to swing with the slivers that we absolutely need to swing with in order to draw a couple cards. We don't want to keep discarding our hand down, and we didn't include a Reliquary Tower in this deck's land package, so drawing too many cards can actually hurt us. This won't hurt us too terribly often because we are a both go wide and go tall deck. We can choose which mode we are operating in. We can either swing all of our slivers at somebody and kill them instantly, drawing a lot of cards, or swing our commander as a singular creature at somebody and then they die. Or, looking at our board, we may actually have the ability to deal enough damage to lethal a single player on this side with the slivers, and then Zinnia can lethal the other player that we've been focusing down with his last strike. Zinnia is hitting them for 13 commander damage, but each of these creatures is swinging for 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, and then these as well, over 40 damage from the slivers. This is likely annihilating a single player and drawing us a huge hand. But note, if you're eliminating players or not, it's really going to depend on where your game is sitting. People may have lower lives. This could end the game right now. People may have incredibly high lives, and you want to be a lot more careful with how you're divvying these resources. It really and truly depends. But do note, if we did not win the game right here, we are ending a game with a counter spell in hand, a Chaos Warp in hand, a Regal Sliver that will give us access to a new draw engine if we lose our board, and a Constricting Sliver which gives us access to even more removal if our opponents play anything that is super important. Also, if we lose the Cleaver Slivers, we have Blade Sliver in the hand, and we'll be able to build the exact same powerful board state on a following turn. In the strange world where we did not win the game off of that last attack, then this is what our board state's going to look like. We're going to pay 5 mana into getting the Blade Slivers online, and there will be 2 other Blade Slivers out because we have a clone from our commander and of course a clone from Reflections of Littjara. By setting up the board state the way that we are, now we have the ability to lethal any player at all, and we get to hold on to this counterspell in our hand in case anything goes awry. And if somebody plays a permanent instead of a spell that we need to worry about, like flipping a permanent up that's not a spell, then we have the Chaos Warp to try to play defense as well. We don't want to sink all of our mana in getting our board any more established. It's already established enough. We lethaled 2 players on turn 8. If we somehow magically sit at turn 9 and a player hasn't left the game, then this is where we are sitting. If we get board wiped, we're not in a bad position. But if we don't get board wiped, we just kind of win. And that's kind of where I have to close things off for this deck. I would like to talk about upgrades for it, but I already did that. I really think that this is where I've got to throw things over to y'all. I don't have anything else to say here. This is the version of the deck that I would play if I had everything available in paper and could afford all of it, and whether or not I can doesn't really matter. I think that this deck will work perfectly fine as it sits. If you really like Slivers, but you don't like the aggro that comes at you when you show that you're playing a Sliver commander, then maybe Zinnia's probably the right choice for you. There's enough Slivers that give lording abilities, and cloning them is just as powerful of an effect as any other Sliver commander can give, except maybe First Sliver. But the goal isn't to make the most powerful Sliver commander, the goal is to make the most fun one. And I think this is probably one of the most fun Sliver commanders I've ever played. All things considered, I think you probably will enjoy it too. It's a blast to have a commander that just kind of sits there and clones your shit no matter what it is, and enter the battlefield triggers just seemed like such a boring way to build Zinnia. That said, I do want to know what y'all think in the comment section below. I want to see how you would upgrade the deck. I want to see if you would take it in a completely different direction, though I might just see the same comments as the last time I made a Zinnia deck. Who knows? That said, let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. Hit the like button, and yeah, as always, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fire Shard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.